I think they finished pulling in all of the characters who I knew going in were going to appear. So now I'm really excited to see where it's going to go from here. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 3. So we pick up from where we left off with the idea of them contacting Zemo. And Zemo's pretty well integrated into this. I like that they're going to him because the knowledge base that he'd obviously built up to do what he did in Civil War is something that they kind of need and can tap into. But I like that they're hinging a lot of this on what the man's ideals were. I like that they haven't just abandoned what they built for this version of Zemo. That is not just like, oh, and now here's my master plan, or he's just even like, no, they remember his core values that he just thinks it's a terrible idea for normal people to have the kind of powers that would come with the super soldier serum. So he would side with them. And even moments where I was like, oh God, is he about to betray them? He didn't. Now, that's not to say he won't later, or that their interests won't diverge, or something along those lines. And for the record, if I were to guess, it's probably going to be Zemo will eventually try to kill Isaiah Bradley. And that would be my hunch on that, but we'll see. So anyways, I like that they've kept the consistency with him, and they introduced Madripoor, which is one of those kind of neat locations from the comics. Just this place of nothing but scoundrel. It's like the Earth equivalent of Mos Eisley. It's nice, and it's fun to see it integrated there. What they did with Sharon was interesting. They actually gave her a lot more depth than I was expecting, because while I never disliked Sharon, the movies didn't really know what to do with her beyond just she's an agent. Whereas here, I like that they emphasize the fact that she got hung out to dry. And basically nobody's circled back around to pull her out of the situation she's been in for a while now. And that's interesting to think about. And it's the kind of thing that has been getting reiterated actually across this particular show, because between someone like Isaiah Bradley and the fact that he was deliberately obfuscated and the government made sure no one knew about him, to what happened with Sharon, and with Zemo pointing out that Sokovia is basically gone now and asking,
Don't suppose any of you bothered visiting the memorial? Of course not. Why would you?
And just pointing out that people being overlooked really seems to be becoming the heart of the thematics of this, and I'm enjoying watching that develop, especially because it feeds into the villains with the Flag Smashers. That's their whole thing. It's like, you know, there were these people who vanished, they came back, and now we who have been here for the whole time have been left behind. Although we're also getting inclinations that the accommodations being made from the people who came back from the blip, that's not great either. So, like, things aren't good for anybody, but there's a lot of emphasis on the overlooked people. The people who just, if nobody goes out of their way to be sure they're taken care of, get left behind. And that is that's a theme that's spreading further across the show. And I'm really enjoying seeing that integrated. And the action scenes are, again, pretty solid in this. Sam pretending to be organized criminal type. I think the show thought it was funnier than I thought it was. I was just like, okay. Like, the jokes were exactly what I expected them to be. But it wasn't bad. And again, I like Madripoor as a setting, so, you know, I muscled through it. And they're definitely now, having given us initially a more sympathetic or relatable, or at least not outright jerk view of John Walker earlier on when he was first introduced, now we are starting to get to see the worse side of that. That he really is starting to paint the world in terms of with us, against us, results matter more than methods, possibly. He seems to be inching that way. And especially that moment where he slams a guy who's, yes, he's been aiding and abetting the Flag Smashers, but like, he's just a guy who owns a store and is trying to help for a cause he believes in. Again, given what John Walker and presumably the U.S. government and military think of that cause. It's not shocking. He roughs the guy up, but then he gets in his face and yells,
"Do you know who I am?"
I wonder if that's something that's going to come back, because they could do one of two things. Either they could go just straight to the idea of being Captain America, went directly to his head, which would work, but I caught a glimmer in that interaction that is what I would rather see, which is the idea that he thought that he would be granted the kind of respect and admiration that at least he imagined Steve Rogers had. Of course, he didn't know Steve. He doesn't know what struggles Steve actually had, but from the outside looking in, Steve Rogers was admired and adored, and people understood that he stood for something wonderful. And I think the more interesting way to twist John Walker would be that he thought that by, in his mind, earning the right to wear that suit meant he would get that same thing. That, again, Steve didn't even really have in a pure form, but John Walker clearly thought he did. And realizing that he doesn't get that could make him bitter, could make him spiteful, could make him more aggressive than situations call for. And I'm going to be curious to see how that goes. Part of me thought initially, like, are we losing some nuance to the guy as he starts to get painted more and more as sort of the, not the villain, but like our initially presented villains, the Flag Smashers, are being portrayed with a fair amount of sympathy, and a guy who initially we were kind of framed and invited to have sympathy for is being painted more and more nastily. Part of me wondered, are we losing some nuance with him as we're gaining it with some of the other characters? But then thinking on it, no, I think provided they just don't make it as simplistic as the power went to his head, like if they can grant at least a little bit of more of an insight into it than that. But like the truth is, he is... Oh, I'm trying to think if there's an apolitical way for me to say this. There isn't. He is somebody who just feels like he earned the highest place in the land because that's the trajectory of what his career was. I came in the military, I was decorated, I did all these things, I deserve to be here. But the thing is, even if you check all the boxes, even if you do all the things that you're quote-unquote supposed to do to get to a certain place of influence or power of authority, doesn't mean you should actually be the person to wield it. It doesn't mean that you automatically get to have it. And again, I'm sorry for getting political, but I can't help but think of Brett Kavanaugh, who his attitude during his confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court was one of, I deserve this because I went to these schools. I did this work in the law. I was this kind of judge. I have a right to this job. And no, you don't. And I'm starting to get that impression now off of, well, even in hindsight, looking back on his first appearance in the last episode, I'm starting to get that vibe off John Walker. And the only reason he wasn't as snotty about it initially is because he wasn't getting pushback to getting the job. But now that he's got it, and it's not what he maybe thought it was going to be, that brattiness, that spoiled entitlement, that might be starting to come out. And I think that is a direction, especially given everything else that we're dealing with right now, with forgotten people, with the manipulation and abuse and history of just absolutely horrific treatment of African Americans by the American government and the American military branches particularly. If we're going to bring that in, actually, it's worth going that direction with him and maybe losing a little bit of nuance for the character to just make the point better. Because if you're 3 episodes in and you haven't realized that these are the themes and the points that this thing is dealing with, I don't know what to say to you at this point. It was also really exciting to get to the end and to get one of the awesome guards from the Black Panther and from Wakanda. Part of me was a tiny bit disappointed that it wasn't Okoye specifically, but we still got a really good one because this is Ao, who is the one who had that iconic line from Civil War.
Move, or you will be moved.
So, like, look, if we're not going to get Okoye, good pick. And, like, she's been in she was in Black Panther. She showed up in other places. So, even though we didn't have my favorite of the options for one of these characters, they picked a good one. Ao was a good one. So, I'm really starting to appreciate the depths of the theming here. And actually, if I'm going to make a comparison to WandaVision real quick, given how long it took for WandaVision to start to tip its hand as to what its core themes actually were, I am appreciating how this is laying out its themes more cleanly with every episode. Now, the only one that you could maybe say the themes weren't fully present yet is episode 1, but like that's the introductory episode. By episode 2, where we've gotten Isaiah Bradley, we had the confrontation between Sam and the cops, and now we're getting these moments that I mentioned about the emphasis on forgotten and abandoned people and learning more about what's behind the flag smashes and seeing the entitlement of someone like John Walker. I'm just enjoying watching the theming get brought in more and more with each episode and to see it so well integrated. Like, I do tend to harp on theming a lot these days. I want to be clear. Good theming or theming that I agree with does not make something good in and of itself, but it can make a good, well-told story all the better and all the more meaningful. And I'm hoping that they can keep the trajectory because they're headed that way right now. I'm getting more impressed with this show every episode we get. So I'm going to be excited for the next one. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 3. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. I have a Patreon. There might be a link up there. More likely, you'll have to go to the description because parts of YouTube are currently broken. I don't know why. They just are. There are rewards for all tiers of support, but even if you can't, like, share, subscribe, they all help me out. But don't sweat that either. Because I take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break.